I come to you from Los Angeles, home of Hollywood studios and digital innovators, to speak about the future of copyright law. How do we peer 20 years into the future? By going backwards. 500 years ago, right here in Rome, a lively history of book publication helps to set the stage. First, we have to put it in context. A few years earlier, Eliyahu Halevi Bachur put the finishing touches on his book of Hebrew grammar, Journey on the Paths of Knowledge. But a catastrophe broke out in his hometown of Padua, and he was forced to flee. An interloper got a hold of the manuscript and published it under his own name. Bachur received nothing. Based on that experience, when Bachur came to Rome, he acted to safeguard his interests. St. Peter's Basilica was not yet constructed, but the Vatican, on whose soil you're sitting today, was already long in operation, of course. Thanks to the intercession of Cardinal Petrus Aegidus, Bachur received a papal privilege in his work. He also turned, surprisingly, to the rabbis of Rome for a comparable grant, and they accommodated him by granting the world's first Ktav Dat, a rabbinic privilege in one and the same work. Thus we see that the seeds were sown 500 years ago for the development of copyright here in Rome, based on the unique cultural circumstances of the time, as well as the technology extant at the beginning of the 16th century. Those circumstances were not limited to Italy. At the same time, the king granted the first royal privilege in England to the book that you see cited, published by Richard Pinson. Now, at this time in its development, the printing press was suitable for producing books. It did not yet extend to the other arts then extant, such as painting and music. Admittedly, my focus is rather parochial. The vast majority of humankind was not concerned with book production, nor with the legal protection for books. Rather, almost everyone alive was working then in agriculture or else in the new technologies made possible by Renaissance advances. Law arises in response to the social situation of mankind, and thus we see a host of regulations arising as to those industries that were developing and as to the rules in agriculture. Within that panoply, copyright was but a small player. And yet, there were many developments in the field of copyright, of which I have time to tell you about only one. The main division in the field is between the Anglo-American scheme, which we can call copyright, and was what is followed here on the continent, the droit d'auteur system. Copyright is an instrumentalist device designed to give an incentive to authors by rewarding them for the works that they create. On the other hand, the droit d'auteur system emphasizes the natural and inherent bond between author and artistic progeny. Copyright, therefore, is based on economics, whereas droit d'auteur is based more on the moral rights underlying the system. If we go ahead 450 years, we see that not that much happened in the interim. 50 years ago, in order to distribute books in large quantities, you still needed to have access to a printing press. And the same thing applied to those who wished to distribute music 40 years ago, or even motion picture 30 years ago. But today, everything is different. Thanks to the internet, works can be published and disseminated all across the globe. A turning point happened in 1994 when a lyricist for the Grateful Dead and co-founder of the Electronic Frontier Foundation published a digital manifesto in Wired magazine proclaiming the death of copyright under the mantra, "Information wants to be free." The reality is more nuanced. As Stuart Brand pointed out 10 years earlier, information does want to be free because it is so cheap to distribute. Paradoxically, though, information wants to be expensive because it is so valuable. We see ourselves at an inflection point, equivalent perhaps to what happened in the Renaissance with the development of the printing press. And the upheaval is all over, throughout the law, and especially in the law of copyright. The zeitgeist has responded. We can find many articles calling copyright the enemy of free expression. Indeed, the tension plays out in two books with similar names. On the one hand, says Wired editor Chris Anderson, free is the natural price point for all works of authorship. On the other, responds journalist Robert Levine, those who take advantage of Napster and its successors are digital parasites, sucking the life out of culture. Indeed, the word free itself is a misnomer, as it arises only when someone has made a considerable investment in hardware. When people obtain music or movies for free, it could be that the creator is getting nothing, but that does not mean that nobody is profiting in the process. So where does all this take us? A book that was published earlier this week gives the prediction of futurist Vivek Wadhwa. He previewed it already in the press. The first proposition is the familiar trope, anything that can be digitized will be. The second one is also not far from our consciousness, given the radical changes we have seen in so many labor markets. Your job has a significant chance of being eliminated. When you lose your job, the natural tendency would be for you to look for a new job. And yet, maybe even that will change. Life could become so affordable that you will not even need to have a job. The dismal science of economics will fall away in that future world of plenty. So how will you spend your time when all is leisure? By starting a blog, perhaps. By watching your daughter and her grandmother combine to make a video mashup, or as hip-hop artists. All up and down the block, people might be creating new sculptures and poems and video games. Life can be lived for the sake of art, as was available in the past only to a privileged few. In this future, everyone gets to be a diva. James Cameron will still direct, but he will be in head-to-head competition with the 15-year-old next door and another from rural India. Each can continue to hone their art, regardless of popularity. Now, I do not know if Wadhwa's vision will be the accurate prediction 20 years from now, But if it is, we will see upheaval across numerous industries. And as those industries cease to exist, the law will fall away that govern them. What will remain, however, is the law for the works of authorship that people will continue to create. And thus, copyright law will remain with us. But that field itself must change. I've already told you that copyright derived from the royal privilege, and indeed, even to this day, the word that is used for the money earned by authors is a royalty. So in that future world where people are not working at jobs for money, that situation no longer pertains. How then does Anglo-American copyright law give a reward to authors for creating works? Well, the interesting answer is that reward comes through the recognition that those authors garner. And wonderfully, that device is exactly the same one that has always undergirded continental theory in the droit à la paternité, the attribution right. This perspective also brings together the two views that we already saw from those complementary books. Robert Levine is correct that authors who create works must retain the ability to control them. But Chris Anderson also has a point, that if nobody is working for money, then authors too will give it away for free. This focus on control brings our fundamental word author back to its Latin cognates. Authors must have the authority to authorize the works that they create. Art can be its own reward, seamlessly integrated with life for those who love to create. And we are all natural-born storytellers. The difference is, in the future, we will no longer need to punch a time clock. So my journey from Los Angeles, which means the angels, ends right next door at the Castel Sant'Angelo, also named after an angel. These ruminations evoke the better angels of our nature. In this vision, copyright law leads us towards a brighter future. Thank you.